Good evening and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. 3,000
but it's the next
horsepower.
iteration of an existing system.
But it's a design. It's not manufacturing anything.
I think there should be, there are restrictions. You have to be licensed to carry a weapon.
Addiction, and I think that if we took a more compassionate approach, we might find more of a solution.
Radical swing of the pendulum. Now we're, it's more liberal, more progressive, more.
It's time for us to honor those folks who, send comments to it.
And good evening and welcome to Frankly Speaking. This is the holiday edition. I'm Joe Spina and...
Hi, it's Paul Crowley. How are you folks doing back home?
But did you have a nice Christmas?
I had a blast. It was nice and relaxed, quiet, no kids.
It's nice like that, isn't it?
Yeah. I've lost all interest in the materialistic aspect of Christmas, I suppose.
Spirituality, Paul.
I don't know about that, but,
It got soul. You have soul, huh?
I have soul. Yes.
Folks, truth is our mission, rally our realm, said as we see it, and...
Frankly as well.
Of course.
I can
that's
remember
what we're
that
all
line,
about.
yeah.
I want to go do a little, can we do a little of this, the golden years, a little flashback, so to speak?
Okay.
Yeah, so in this particular flashback, note the two individuals.
Yeah, when I first saw that, I was amazed. So you got Doug Flutie and Donald Trump. So Donald Trump actually was part of the USFL.
Yes, he was.
He
As a
owned the
matter of
General-
fact, he was the owner of the New Jersey Generals,
Right.
if you remember. And Herschel Walker was one of his picks. So what he did is he signed back in 1982, when you were just a young pup then, He owned the Generals, what they call the New Jersey Generals, and he sold the team in '83, and then he bought it back again. So Doug Flutie played extremely well, by the way, for the Generals, and then he broke his collarbone on the 15th game of the season.
Then he went to Canada, and then he played for the Patriots. He had a
Yeah.
pretty long, illustrious career. But you know what's really interesting about with the Donald Trump piece of this is and I thought about this after the fact, hindsight being 20/20, but the idea that got him involved in buying into a franchise, I think, was when people started to realize that there's value in being able to draft football players. I mean, there is value. So the NFL has this kind of monopoly on football talent, right? Mm-hmm. So every year, just because they are NFL teams, they get to draft the best football specimens on the planet, right? Put them on their teams and so forth. So what he did and all the other guys did, they came together and they drafted them too. Mm-hmm. So now the value is in their players, and the NFL essentially had to pay off all of the members of the USFL in one form or another in order to get them to stop pulling away their talent.
One of the greats was Steve Young, right? He played for one of the...
And Herschel Walker, right?
And Herschel Walker. Right. And actually Doug Flutie. There was a bias against Flutie.
Because he was too short.
Exactly.
Right.
Fran Tarkenton was another guy that was supposedly too short.
Right.
And you could go into a number of them. So you never know. Currently, the fellow from the Seattle, Russell Wilson,
Yep.
he's only 5'11".
Flutie was only 5'9".
And he could jump. And
he couldn't see over the 6'7", but he was a great football player.
He could dunk.
Yep.
And he was a great basketball player.
Right.
Terrific athlete. And also I want to talk about something that maybe these folks didn't know about, the Goldwater girl. You know who the Goldwater girl was?
I do now.
You
Didn't
do?
before, but first let's talk about who Barry Goldwater is. I mean, for folks back home, maybe the younger folks back home that watching don't know that Barry Goldwater was like he was the birth of the conservative movement.
Oh, he was.
In some respects, right?
Extremism is extremism and the defense of liberty is not a vice.
Right.
I think that was his famous quote. He ran against Lyndon Johnson after the assassination. As a matter of fact, he was going to run against John F. Kennedy before the assassination. And he was on a path to do quite well, and he chose Bombs Away LeMay. I don't know if you remember him. He was the general of the Air Force, wanted to bomb everybody, as his vice president. And this happened after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, and we almost got in 2 nuclear wars with JFK. So he was considered somewhat unstable. He got assassinated, so history took a different perspective on him. But Barry Gold was actually in really good shape to run against Kennedy.
In 59?
It was 1960. It was 1963 when he got assassinated. But he began his campaign in 1963. To run for 64.
Oh, I see. Before Kennedy was assassinated, he was planning to run against him.
Of course he was.
I thought you meant back when Nixon ran.
No. As a matter of fact, Barry Goldwater, he was a general in his own right, and at that time, the Cold War, we were kind of more militaristic than we are today, or geared toward that notion. And he was on the cover of Time magazine and Newsweek, as the alternative. This was a conservative era.
So he is the equivalent of let's say a Ted Cruz or
Bernie Sanders on the left.
Bernie Sanders of the right is what you're saying.
Well, Bernie Sanders represents the left.
Right.
Barry Goldwater was the Bernie
Right.
Sanders of the right back.
Okay.
He was the father of the conservative move. Ronald Reagan.
Right. So I guess my point. Yeah. So he's like a Ronald Reagan type. He's a very conservative right-wing guy, kind of like Ted Cruz, right?
Exactly.
And what were you going to tell us about the Golden Girl?
Well, the Golden Girl, Hillary Clinton, was a volunteer for his campaign. She worked ardently for him back
Is that right?
Yeah, for Barry Goldwater in 1982, 83.
Was that before or after she wrote her thesis on Saul Alinsky?
Well, she went to the convention. She went to the Republican convention. She was a delegate at the Republican convention. Her flip, and in fact, she went to the Republican convention in 1968, post Barry Goldwater era. Barry Goldwater was completely vilified. That was the famous ad, the Daisy ad, where the little girl is
right.
one, two,
And
countdown.
the nuclear bomb goes off. behind.
Boom, yeah. That was the issue then. So she was a young Republican, attended the 1968 convention, and then she got the nickname Goldwater Girl. That's what she was called. And then by 1972, she flipped. She did a George McGovern.
So when does Bill Clinton come into the picture?
What about Billy?
When does he come into the picture? Well,
we're saying
not while she was a Republican girl or a
Well,
Goldwater girl.
I think the conversion, her shift from 1968 when she was a young Republican to 1972 when she was a McGovern, which is 180 the opposite
Right.
direction, is probably a consequence of her stay at Wellesley College, where folks, I don't mean to upset you, but those 50, 60 grand a year you're paying for your kids to get educated is an indoctrination.
Not an education, right?
Right. So she probably got indoctrinated, bit on the neck while she was in Wellesley, and the rest is history. And she met Bill, I think, at Yale after she graduated. So let's assume it was back in 76 or 77, something in that era.
Right. Okay. So her thesis on Saul Alinsky came after the Goldwater years.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because that's when she, like I said, it was an all-girls college, isn't it?
Wellesley. Yep.
And what she did was she was chummy with a bunch of radical feminists at that time. That she was associated with. But anyways, let's talk about the year 2016 in review.
The year that was.
Yeah, it was. It was a year of.
Well, actually, the year that still is.
What's interesting about it, Paulie, is it started with clowns and jeers and cheers and tears. And if you look up here, you see this little clown.
That's the picture on the screen. That doesn't that look? I mean, is that Hillary Clinton with a clown nose on?
Well, here's the funny feature. It's supposed to be originally. Remember, the clown was
Donald Trump.
All over
and
the place.
they're still thinking of him as a
Right.
clown.
So he was the clown, and who ended up with the tears?
Yeah.
That's right. So the clown is smiling. The one who is not, quote unquote, the clown is now having the tears of a clown.
And by the way, and I have to qualify this by saying, I'm trying to think about how I reacted after Barack Obama won in 2009, because I was concerned about what I viewed at the time as a socialist coming into power, and the shift in the way things were going to happen in this country, because he absolutely said it on a number of occasions during the campaign that he wanted to fundamentally transform the country.
Yes, he did.
So I was, a little bit concerned about him, and upset, if you will, and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of trying to put myself in the shoes of the Democrats, the liberals, the progressives, who are all, upset now because Donald Trump is in power. But they seem to be. It seems to be different, and it's
There's
different.
A lot of
in
vitriol.
Yeah, the vitriol is there, and also they're still saying that he has no business being there.
Yes.
As much as I disagreed with Barack Obama's policies and his interest in fundamentally changing the country, I didn't think he didn't deserve to be there. Although I was, it's funny how he was a one-term senator. Had only been in there for a couple of years. He had never really had a job in his life.
And still
Donald Trump is not considered qualified.
And still has never had a job in his life, and he's approaching retirement age.
Right. And Donald Trump is viewed by all these folks as unqualified.
Paul, I'm going to tell you a little irony of life.
So I guess it all depends on where you stand, right?
Well, here's the funny feature. At your alma mater, I've been asked to step in for someone who's on paternity leave and teach a little history for a month. And the area happens to be with unification of Germany, Italy, and the Russian Revolution. So I've been researching, brushing up. The irony of someone like Otto von Bismarck, thought to be an autocrat, in which you would equate Donald Trump. Well, Otto von Bismarck
created
was a
Social Security.
Not only Social Security, Medicare. He was fearful of the socialists. He looked at the Catholic Church and socialism as competitors against the concentration of imperial power. All right? So he believed in the monarchy. And when he took a look, he said he didn't like Catholics because he felt the Catholics' first loyalty would be to the church and to the Pope as opposed to Kaiser Wilhelm, right?
Right.
So they had to be snuffed. In so doing, he got backlashed, and then he decided, I better rule him. So he started playing good guys with the
Well, it's kind of like Constantine when he
precisely
went after he wanted to make Christianity. Didn't he take Christianity and paganism and kind of merge them?
He unified, glued the entire empire by introducing Christianity as the state religion, okay?
Right, which had elements of paganism in it.
All of it did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you have saints and the rest of it, okay?
Right.
Because they're demigods. But this is why people should study history, because you can't understand the present. What's happening today is replica. It's just the same as what happened to Otto von Bismarck. So then Otto von Bismarck took a look at the socialists, and socialists were obviously revolutionaries who were looking to create republics. They wanted to end monarchy. And their programs were antithesis to the Junkers, the landed gentry.
Right. Those in charge.
But he decided to
the establishment, right?
That was the establishment,
Right.
the rule of the organized minority. But what he turned around and he did, wisely, is he out-socialized them. And therefore, he created, as you mentioned, Social Security, health care benefits, accidental insurance, education, very important. He wanted an educated workforce. He invested heavily in education, quality education, very strict. Obedience, number one, obedience, reading, writing, arithmetic. And don't you think every other country, because this is a point in time where they're moving from monarchy to representative government.
Right.
All through Europe. So don't you think everybody picked up on him and tried to build on what he did? In fact, Japan modeled its entire society on Prussia, on Otto von Bismarck. So did the United States. This is the fallacy that everybody tends to think that these are all new novel ideas. No, they're not. They're offshoots. There's no new stories. The Romeo and Juliet story has been told over and over and over again in different forms throughout mankind.
But wasn't there a grand experiment with the United States, though?
Look, I'm going to point out to the kids, if you take a look at Texas, what is horrifying, most people don't even think about this, that Texas is almost twice the size of Germany in land area. Germany is a very small geographic area. The United States has every resource in the world contained in this continent. That luxury doesn't exist for Germany or Japan, etc. They can only feed themselves by export, by trade. They can only get the resource, in particular Japan, they had completely resource poor.
Right.
They had to import. So all of this here necessitated empire. Now we say, oh, empire and imperialism is such a terrible, horrible thing. That's the new modern mantra. Without realizing the United States, as I sit here with you, Paul, is an imperial country. We have Samoa, we have Puerto Rico, we used to have the Philippines. You know, we own territory of the Virgin Islands. That makes us an empire, Paul. And we have certain hegemony over the Dominican Republic, which is the reason why so many Dominicans have come to this country, because we protect it. And rightfully so, I'm not, you know. So we shouldn't be so quick to make the statements that we make without understanding history. And I would venture to say, since nowadays in college, professors don't know history, they refuse to teach it, particularly U.S. history, and when they do, they teach it from a revolutionary perspective in a negative sense, that somehow the United States is this evil, evil country mindset of white supremacists. That's the mantra. Now, that's year 2016 in steroids.
Right.
This is the year of the attack, if you want to be honest about it, of European Western civilization of the white guys.
Right.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I feel it every day.
All the time. So, moving on.
And I didn't do anything. What did I do to deserve that?
What was that?
Because I was born white?
Boy, Paul, you know, they're going to exterminate you. There's a professor, well, don't laugh about this, Professor Drexel in Philadelphia, of all places,
Right.
who is saying that they should exterminate the white race. I mean, that's what he's preaching. You know what his Christmas carol was? The extinction of white men. You like that one? This is what they're teaching. 65 grand a year. Anyways, if anything, 2016 was the year of was a violent year.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at Chicago, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, they said there were 43 shot.
45 just at Christmas.
Just over the Christmas weekend, there were 45 people shot. How many dead for the whole year?
Take a look, Paulie. I mean, well, you know, you have to look at your research papers here. Folks, year to date in Chicago, shot and killed. Year to date. Now, this year isn't over yet. 785, Paul. Would you believe that? How many were shot and wounded?
3,600.
Can you see how many were shot and wounded? 3,629.
Yeah.
And for a total of 4,334 people either killed, shot, or whatever, right?
And Iraq is a war zone.
Take a look at Iraq and Afghanistan. How many in both of those places would you
31
argue?
combined, and they're war zones.
Yeah. Where would you rather be?
I'd rather be in Afghanistan.
Or Iraq?
Yeah.
Yeah, dodging ISIS. Because you're safer there than you are in Chicago. Got it? I mean, it's awful. And by the way...
That's where
even though I
Obama's
did-
from.
Huh?
Isn't that where Obama's from?
South Chicago, as a matter of fact. That's where he did his community organizing, him
Right.
and Bill Ayers.
So what-
and Louis Farrakhan, and Reverend Wright, and
So-
Saul Alansky, by the way.
So if you go back 8 years, is this 785 shot, killed, and wounded, and total shot? Is this a number that is flat, declining, or increasing? It's increasing.
Of course it's increasing.
So under Obama's watch, it got worse.
Of course, yeah, and by
And
the
here's
way,
a guy who's supposed to unite us all.
as you and I speak here, you know what happened in food stamps? It's tripled. And he's just added another 10 million before he leaves. He's doing a lot of stuff. He's trying to do a lot of stuff to embed his Saul Alansky mindset
Right.
ingrain it into the government.
You know what really bugs me? I think I've talked about this before. Is in the last year of everybody's presidency, they talk about the legacy and so forth, but he talks about it as not what is my legacy, is what do I need to do to cement my legacy, which to me is kind of an indoctrination, a manipulation of the masses to get them to believe that what he did was and why he did it were necessarily different than what actually happened.
What is fascinating to me is he's convinced that he was a great president. He's convinced everybody else is wrong and that he's right, that they just can't see how great he is.
Right.
Okay?
Just time needs to go by.
Right. I mean, he is delusional. Because if you take a look, Race relations are down the tubes. The world is on fire. The economy's in shambles the way he's going, and he's bankrupting the country. So on what measure has he been successful? Maybe.
Two measures he's been successful. As a result of him being the president, gun sales are through the roof,
Yeah.
right? And
Republicans are taking over everything.
Right. We now have some sanity in the White House and in the state houses across the country.
Unbelievable. And yet he considers himself successful.
Well, that's a success, right? I mean, he paved the path to success.
Well, let me give you something, and this is interesting because it's social change, and it was neither good nor bad. But here's where he put his attention. You could call 2016 the year of the rainbow, or the rainbow cometh. On May 17th, the Senate confirms Eric Fanning to be Secretary of the Army. You know why that's interesting?
He was a declared gay.
Yeah, he's the first gay who was openly gay. On June 24th, President Obama announced his designation of the first national monument, a national monument to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights. The Stonewall National Monument that encompasses Christopher Park and Stone Inn, surrounding streets and sidewalks, were sites of the 1969 Stonewall Uprising in New York City, of which I am not familiar. I don't know whether you are.
No, I am not.
And in June 30th, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter announces Pentagon is lifting the ban on transgender people serving openly in the U.S. military. So, if you happen to be from that community, you love Obama because he focused so much upon it. The problem is there was never really a discussion about this. You know, national discussion per se.
No.
And
You were just vilified if you didn't agree with it.
exactly. So that is, and there are other, remember when the White House was rainbowed?
Yeah.
That was this year.
It was the red, white, and the
rainbow color.
Right.
You know, and so
That was when the Supreme Court upheld
whatever it did, the
same-sex
DOMA,
marriage
the
or-
defensive marriage, and he has appointed more openly gay judges to district and courts of appeal across the board. I mean, elevate. Now, I'm saying if you're talking about, I mean, is this a quota system? If it's a quota system, it's disproportionately high.
Right.
If it's based on merit, I have no problem.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
If anything's based on merit, I have no
Well,
problem.
you know that they say that Lady Liberty is, Lady Justice is blind.
Yeah.
Right. Supposed to not have any opinion. Supposed to, but that's so not true in this society today. I mean,
How
it's
can you
probably
separate yourself from your thoughts and feelings, Paul?
well, I suppose you can't, but they don't really put any emphasis at all in trying to find people with the characteristics of being open-minded and looking to look
Do you
at
honestly think that an individual could go before an openly gay judge who refused to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple
and win
and
Right,
win? Exactly.
Right.
I mean, so you have to be realistic about these things. Another fascinating part of 16 is Faces of Islam, Paul, and it's fascinating to me because you could look at it as hope and fear.
Can we just say, I want to say one thing about the whole gay movement that happened this year, and that is that I think that there's, regardless of your sexual preference, being included in whatever life brings you should not be a problem, right? In other words, you shouldn't be excluded because of sexual preference, all that stuff. So, just the kind of my attitude towards things. And I want to make it a point that it seems to me that both and what I would call is the radicals in the gay movement, as well as those that are staunchly opposed to anybody who is gay, collectively foul it up for a society that really needs to embrace people for who they are, not what they do.
But they're the organized minority, Paul.
Right. So, but that's so. Those crazies on the left that are saying, you must not only do you have to agree with me, you have to appreciate it. You have to think positively. And then you have the people on the right that say, absolutely not. If you have homosexual thoughts, we don't want anything to do with it. Those two groups need to be, those are the ones that needs to be pushed aside so that we can operate normally. And that's just...
We ought to have community standards that regardless of your orientation, your ethnic background, your gender, or whatever, that you just can't go to that point. You know, I thought it was probably one of the great, how would I state this? The fact that vulgarity is so prevalent in our discourse today, in television and nudity and sexuality, we're almost desensitized. Growing up, you could not find a book that had a 4-letter word in it. Impossible. They would censor it right out.
Right.
Okay, society spoke in a very civil way. They did not lower their standards of dialogue. Motion pictures were suggestive, but certainly not, you know, explicit.
Catcher in the Rye.
You got it. Now, why have we moved to this thing called realism to such a point where it's really kind of disgusting, you know, and it kills it creates. Why should the fringe impose its quote unquote perversion or preference on others who want to resist it? You know, if you're church going, why should you have people who are secular they look at church going people as if they're superstitious doofus. Am I right?
Yeah. No, I know. And I guess that's where my argument comes in. It seems to me that, you know, this business of, you know, like you pointed out earlier, the baker who refuses on religious grounds to bake a cake for a gay couple, right? Mm-hmm. I can see both points of view. You know, the gay couple wants to have a cake, right? And the baker wants to deal with their religious rights. Now, for somebody to say you must make that cake for me is kind of foolish in my view. That's a demand placed on society that you change your belief system to accommodate two people who would be really much better served if they would go to somebody who didn't have a problem with it.
Well, that's the whole point. The point is that there is an open market there, that there are many bakers who will be more than happy. So it isn't as if they're being cut out,
right,
and ostracized, per se.
And I'm thinking this through as we say it, but, you know, let's just take people of color who, you know, the civil rights was based on, right?
Yeah.
People of color. So if a white baker refused to do a cake for a black couple, now that I have a problem with. Because there's no reason to say no other than that you have an issue with them because of their color.
Because of race, yeah.
Right. So that's different, right? Don't you think? I mean, having a religious belief is...
But I want you to think about that. Using that argument there, and we had the Islam up there. Is Islam tolerant of Christianity?
Not at all. So that's your point. And the extremism in the gay community, the extremism, and I focus on the extremist portion of that, is not tolerant of anybody who disagrees with it.
So what do extreme gays want to do? They want to make everybody gay. No?
No,
Not quite? But there are Shia Islamic theocrats who definitely want to convert everybody to Allah, correct?
Yeah, the whole caliphate thing, right?
Doesn't make a difference whether you're Christian, Buddhist, you know, Hindu, Jewish, see you later. Everybody's got to be Islamic, going to submit to Allah, right?
Right.
That's their extreme. Those are the jihadists, correct?
Right.
Okay. What about the moderate, the secular? And there are secular Muslims. For example, Albania, which is the only Muslim majority population in Europe. It's a consequence of the Ottoman Empire. What about, and there are a lot of Bosnians and people from the Balkan Peninsula, probably Bulgaria and places like that, who are Muslim. They have an entirely different perspective, as do the Turks.
Right. So in other words, there's not a lot of extreme jihadism coming out of Albania? Is that your point?
Well, I don't know about that. I would say they're not as affiliated with the jihadist movement. They're not so locked into it as, we'll say, Huma Ahmadin's family, who live in Saudi Arabia, which is highly
Right.
Sharia law, right?
Saudi Arabia's name comes up a lot when they talk about terrorism and so forth, don't they?
It all began there.
And they're supposed to be an ally of ours.
Yeah, well, allies for convenience. You know, World War II, Soviet Union was our ally.
Right.
Okay, so everybody gets bummed out of shape because, you know, Trump may cut a deal with Putin, but let me go back in history a little bit. Let's talk about history a little. In the early 1970s, do you remember Fecto, Richard Fecto?
No, but I know they aimed a school after him.
Richard Fecto got shot down in North Korea over the Yalu River. It's on the border with China. Unfortunately, he landed in China, crash landed in China, and he was picked up by the Chinese in prison for a long, long time, and many years spent in solitary confinement. He became a bargaining chip between the United States and Communist China, Mao, over negotiations. They used him as, you know, a talking point.
Yeah, we'll give you can have him back, but this is what we
Yeah, like a Christian Herder went over there, everybody went over there. But Nixon took a look at the world situation at that time. Now, Nixon was not an ideologue, contrary to popular belief. He was a pragmatist. So he understood that the Soviet Union was a major threat to the United States. So what he did was, he says, you know what, if I hook up with China, that's a counterforce against the Soviet Union, since they have a 2,000-mile border with them, and they're a communist nation. So I'll hook up with them, détente, and clip the wings of the Soviets, you know?
Yep.
Which was brilliant. It's called realpolitik, Otto von Bismarck. Today, what was the great threat? Is it Russia or is it China?
Still China.
Of course.
And now,
so does it make sense for us to have
Trump to
Daytona
align
hook up
with
Putin
Russia?
and Russia to curtail the advance in the, of China, which is the greater threat to the United States?
The key is not to be the odd man out, right?
Precisely.
Right.
And this is why Romney got it all wrong. They say he had it right, but it was wrong.
Hey, I said a month or two ago, before the election, I said I'm not opposed to the idea of trying to align ourselves with Russia. They seem to have more in common with us than opposite
Of
us.
course,
You know?
because, look, they're replete with resources. They're the second largest producer of petroleum in the world, next to Saudi Arabia. Their problem is they don't have any technology per se. They need to import. That's why they hook up with Germany. Germans are very industrialized.
Right.
Once again, Germany, folks, Germany is the size, Texas is twice the size of Germany. So can you imagine why Germany had to be aggressive? It needed land. It has 100 million people, Paul. It took in 1 million refugees. And it's place that's the size, half the size of Texas.
And that's why Angela Merkel's in trouble.
Very much so. So all these migrations, everything that's taken place with Obama and Hillary Clinton, who screwed up the entire Middle East, created this massive migration of people from the Middle East and North Africa into Europe in an area of countries that are the size of our states. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that they can support that. They don't have the farmland or the resources to be able to sustain it.
Right.
And this is crazy. In fact, Merkel, they did a survey of refugees that went into Germany. You know what percentage of them actually get a job out there working?
No, I don't.
Less than 10%, Paul. And you know what they were reasoning, what they said, the refugees?
I would just guess, but I would say they get more money by not.
No, they were guests. They're guests. The host nation, they were guests and should be provided for. That, if you look at Islamic reasoning and law, and you're supposed to be a magnanimous host, right?
Right.
So they see themselves as being guests. You're supposed to take care of us.
Right.
Now, we in Western civilization think that's crazy, but not to them. I mean, this is what people, you have to look into the mindsets.
Yep.
You know, and from their perspective, they got a point.
Yeah, they do. I mean, look, if somebody comes into my home, I treat them as a guest, right?
Precisely. You don't charge them. Hey, you got to wash the dishes and cut the lawn. You know what I mean?
Well, that's not a bad idea, though.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You know, if you want to have food over here, paint the house and fix the roof.
Yeah, and your meal will be waiting for you when you're done.
Also, what's fascinating about 216, in conjunction with jihad and and its negative aspects of it, is the fact that there was a call to build the wall, Paul. That all rhymes, doesn't it? A call to build the wall, Paul. And it's fascinating that became the flashpoint for Donald Trump, the clown.
Yeah.
The clown. Right?
Yeah. And it's funny, and you think about all of the entities that complain about this premise of building a wall. Mm-hmm. The Vatican, surrounded by a wall.
Yeah.
The White House, surrounded by a wall. And they're going to make it bigger because the people are getting over the fence, It really is rather remarkable. Mexico, who,
probably sealed off their southern border.
Right, they don't let anybody, if anybody gets through their southern border, they give them a free ride to the northern borders and help them get across.
To us.
Right.
Yeah. So, Israel has a wall. They don't like that one. And by the way, speaking of Israel, folks, it is really. Can you explain to me why Obama, in his 11th and a half hour, would be so disingenuous as to put the knife to Israel?
It's amazing.
At the United Nations.
Well, he's running. He's. You were saying it earlier. He really thinks he was a great president, but he's probably starting to surmise that with everything that's going to happen under the new administration, that he's got to come up with something else because what he's got isn't going to be good enough. So he figures if he can solve the Middle East crisis by doing this, it's a shot in the dark, I think, from his perspective. And there's only one thing that I can agree with in this whole thing, and that is when you think about the policies of the administrations for the past, going back to 67, let's say, right? If you just think about their policies with respect to Israel, it has always been that if anybody wants to say anything bad about our friend Israel, we will veto it. We have that power so that the World Court can never say anything bad about Israel. And that's how it's been for years. And during that whole time, we have not figured it out, right? We have not solved the problem in the Middle East. Again, I'm just kind of a devil's advocate here. So if you think about it, he's taking that insanity approach where, you can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. He's trying to do something different. But I still think that was really unfortunate that he did that. And you know what he's really done, probably more than anything, is he's eliminated the possibility of the UN ever being effective again. I don't think it ever really was effective at all, but it's lost everything now because Trump is going to marginalize them in a big way.
Does anybody have the courage to tread this point? Barack Obama has an empathy for
Muslims,
for Islam. Mm-hmm. Okay,
he was
we
raised
can't deny that, can we?
No.
I mean, his father from Kenya was a Muslim. His stepfather from Indonesia was a Muslim. He went to school in Indonesia from K through about not the ninth grade, but through adolescence, right? And certainly that had to influence him. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it seems to me that he kind of always...
He has a Muslim bias.
So why, Palestinians are Muslims. The Brotherhood is a Muslim movement. It's interesting where he's gone with the Muslim nations where there's problems. He has always been on the wrong side of the issues.
Well, he's been pro-Muslim. And that by definition...
But nobody says that.
But that is by definition...
But nobody says that. They're afraid to say that. They're afraid to... He says, I'm a Christian. I went to the Christian Liberation Church in South Chicago under Reverend Wright, and was friendly with Louis Farrakhan, who's...
Muslim.
Muslim. Black, what is it called? The Nation of Islam.
Yes.
Right. And so it's fascinating, the linkages here, and you cannot divorce an individual, to point it out, from their bias and their upbringing and where they've been at. So we always bring that to the table in making decisions. They're doing it to Trump. They're trying to say that we're going to predict how Trump's going to operate, and we don't like it, from all of these alleged, examples within his life.
I have a very good friend of mine, a guy I've become very friendly with over the years. I shouldn't say good friend of mine, but I've become friendly. He's very liberal. He is about my age, so he came of age, if you will, during the late 70s, early 80s, when Ronald Reagan was elected. And I asked him just to tell me what was, because he was a community organizer. I call him a community agitator during the first Reagan election cycle, right? And so I said, tell me, what did you do when he won? He said, I went out of my mind. I freaked out. The world was coming to an end. Very, very similar to the way that they're behaving right now. And the reason is because they first of all, the establishment has to do everything they can to marginalize Reagan or Trump or whoever is the outsider, because that's going to put pressure on their power base, right? So there's all that going on. That is, along with the indoctrination that goes on over and over and over again, is being employed against, society at large right now. Don't you think? I mean, in a big way, everybody is being, told, I guess, or suggested to them that everything that Trump might do is going to be terrible.
Yes.
Everything he might do is going to be terrible. I mean, they're talking about this guy Price because he doesn't like the Affordable Care Act, that as a result of that Medicare, as we know it, is gone. How do you draw those, come to those conclusions? And by the way, when you start governing, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or conservative, when you start governing, you have to look at the facts, and you typically...
Paul, the great irony of history should be told that every time that liberal, quote-unquote, ideas become factual, the people benefit, it's always because a conservative has done it against what liberals can't do. Otto von Bismarck instituted all these liberal policies. So the same was with Mussolini. People don't realize the same. And I'm not going for the dictatorship. I mean, and those places that were staunchly liberal, as in Soviet Union, failed. Every one of them. So Ronald Reagan did more to help this country out, and he was a conservative, Paul. Richard Nixon was, allegedly a conservative. These are and Teddy Roosevelt, for God's sake, he was. The progressives have always been, because they're not true ideologues. They're practical, pragmatic people that say, this has to be done for this group because this group has been underrepresented. Efficiency says it's to our best interest to keep these people happy. They don't want revolution. They don't like chaos. They don't like revolutionaries. They like status quos in a sense. They like, well, let me restate that. They like harmony. You think that Donald Trump is an ideologue?
Not at all.
Do you think he's going to work hard in the black community?
Yes.
Why?
Because they've been underserved for so many darn
Precisely.
years.
He understands if you take care of that problem, then you're not going to have 785 people killed in Chicago. He understands if you give disadvantaged groups a really strong education, as they did in Prussia and German unification, Italian unification, and...
Yeah, it will matter.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
So he understands this. The best way to do things is by instituting these policies in real terms, not the way the liberals have done it, which is to monopolize and let the unions prevent any reforms to take place in education and in various departments that are needed.
Right.
And the people who actually do that and make it better for everybody else, historically, it's always been the reactionaries to the revolutionaries. The revolutions burn things, destroy stuff, kill people. That nice?
Right.
The Russian Revolution was brutal. The French Revolution was brutal. Castro was awful.
And what's going on right now, this is a form of revolution, right? There's a movement afoot.
Of course it is, and it's violent. Paul, don't see people? There was an individual whose wife is a congresswoman who fermented all that violence in this election cycle, who sent thugs like the brown shirts, like Nazi Germany, into Trump's rallies to create havoc, and were paid for it, and he visited the White House over 300 times. Now, that should be a news story. That should be...
Wait a minute, I thought that was fake news.
It's not fake news, Paul. That's reality.
No, I know.
The fake news is what they want you...
The fact that they don't even report on it is fake news.
Precisely.
Right.
You mentioned Saul Alansky earlier, and you said, didn't Hillary Clinton write her thesis on Saul Alansky?
Yeah.
Saul Alansky is the nexus between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
Right. Rules for radicals.
Exactly.
How to undermine a society, basically.
So why would you want to put a radical in as a leader of a country? Because what radicals do is create havoc. You know, radical is not a good thing. So take a pragmatist. A pragmatist says, hey, you know, remember Henry Ford?
Yeah, the guy who...
Historically, right?
Yep.
His concept was, what good is if I don't pay my workers enough money so they can buy my cars?
Right.
Counterproductive. So if you pay people enough money so they can buy goods and services, that's really good. That's what industrialists and businessmen think about. How do I keep my best employees? By giving them good benefits, by giving them a good package, a good work environment. Isn't that what they do?
Right. And it's about good employees. You expect good production in return.
Precisely.
Instead of years of service as being the marker that decides whether you get a raise or not, or whether you...
How about this ad? Long hours, sure death, early death, you know, slave labor,
no money.
build pyramids. I mean, what do you think it must have been like in times when we didn't have mechanization? You know, and by the way, folks, I you know, this really troubles me sometimes. You know, disproportionately fell on gender, right? The ones pulling all of those pieces of stone in the hot desert certainly came from your gender, Paul, right? And they were disproportionately. In fact, last week, I don't know if we mentioned
it was a basic premise, right? We were bigger and stronger, right?
So you were the slave.
Right.
So you in World War II, so many men, I think we mentioned last week, in the Soviet Union were killed, that today there are 10 million more women than there are men.
Right.
So nobody likes to, if you do the statistic in Chicago, how many percentage of those 785 that were shot?
95 are men.
Exactly. Probably
Boys.
more, yeah.
Probably
So
not even men.
We
boys.
don't talk about these types of things too often. So when it comes to equality, oh, wait a second, that doesn't fit some of our narrative, so let's not talk about it. Now, Paul, I wouldn't have it any other way, because I find women to be precious. They're life givers.
Right.
You know? But let's talk about it realistically. If that's the case, do you want to enlist into the armed forces a bunch of women? That's crazy on the battlefield.
Well,
Would you want your daughter to go on the battlefield, Paul?
Absolutely not. And the other part about this that really just amazes me is how, you know, this is a whole argument. We need to let women participate in this, that, and the other. You know, and sure, I'm all for, you know, bringing them in and letting them be part of the situation. But do the women really want to be placed in harm's way?
Not a sane one. I mean, Paul, I sent you a picture, an email, of my oldest granddaughter with her bow at a Christmas tree. On one side, Joe Biden. On the other side, Joe Biden's wife, which, by the way, offended me. But anyways, I mean, you know, she just got a raise over at Brown and Harriman. She's now a analyst, senior analyst or whatever.
Good for her.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I applaud, and she's smart enough to get her cousin a job with the same company because you got a finder's fee for getting her. So I'm very proud of my 6 granddaughters of varying ages from 13 to 26.
And if one of them told you that she wanted to join the armed forces, you'd be supportive of that, right?
Of course I would be. In fact, my Natalia came home with combat boots on. And I asked her when she was ready to go. And she's part Jewish, so she's probably on her way to Israel to fight the Palestinians, you know what I mean? But what I'm saying to you is, of course not. You don't deny a person. See, we don't talk about persons, Paul.
Right, it's groups. It's always
We
groups.
talk about gender, we talk about sexual preference, we talk about nationality, all the good things. You know, we are members of something by birth, accident of birth. You're a male by accident of birth, Paul, I hate to tell you. You happen to be Greek and Irish in accident of birth. You can't change that. But you're not supposed to deny it. You're not supposed to dislike the fact of who you are. You should be happy with it, but at the same token, everybody has their own uniqueness. And instead of doing a Solanansky and hurting anybody into bees and ants and drones, do you like a society of that?
Not at all.
That's precisely what they're trying to do,
Social
Paul.
engineering, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's an amazing process. So we got about 3 minutes, Paul. Why don't we talk about what we're looking forward to? You got any forward looks? What are you thinking? What do you think is going to happen?
I'm looking forward to the inauguration. You come with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
folks, we're going to be there.
We're going to be there, and we're going to be there with cameras. Hopefully, we're going to get some media access, and we hopefully bring back some
and then we'll report
some
on
stories
it.
about what happened down there. You know, certainly a momentous occasion. Whether even if you're not a Trump supporter, it is a momentous time, right?
You know,
I mean, it's not when the first black man became president. I think that's a great thing, and I'm glad that it happened because it was really an important thing.
I wish someone would point out the fact that Barack Obama's mother happened to be Caucasian.
Right.
So when people talk about first black, I mean, his skin tone is darker. Maybe he has characteristics of, but he's not an African American in the sense that, he was a product of slavery.
Right.
He's African American in the real sense that his father was from the continent of Africa and his mother was from the United States. But, let's not make more of it than it really is.
Right.
If Ben Carson had been elected president of the United States, then I would applaud. Not because of his philosophy, because he came from poverty in Detroit and he became a world-renowned neurosurgeon for pediatrics. And by the way, this is what gets good. Let me get to this point. Would you say he's an accomplished human being?
Without a doubt.
Of extraordinary talent?
Yes.
He happens to be a very religious man. And he's knocked because of that.
Right.
They discount all his other stuff.
Because he disagrees with their philosophy or their
Because
ideology.
he believes in God, Paul.
Yep.
These folks don't want to believe in God. They believe in mankind. And therefore they blame mankind for everything.
So I got to go on record here. I believe in God too, and boy, does he help and guide me through life.
God's going to take care of global warming, by the way. You think he wants us to wipe out? You think that he wants human beings to wipe themselves out?
So I have this new philosophy on that. I'd like to throw this out there. So, I always remember growing up and realizing things like, they say all good things in moderation, that general truism, right? You think about water, right? A little bit of water in a cup quenches your thirst. 10 inches of rain in about 5 minutes will flood your house up. Not so good, right? Fire. A little bit of fire underneath your pot, cook your food. Too much fire, your house burns down, right? Things like that. Nature seems to have kind of this tendency to have, everything is there for a reason, but it can't be overused. Too much abundance is a bad thing. Let's equate that. Now let's talk about fossil fuels and that same thing. I mean, so fossil fuels, if used sparingly and without too much, is not going to adversely impact the environment, I think. And too much will, make it like L.A. Remember L.A. back in the 70s when it was a big smog? Anyway.
That's profound, Paul. That's really profound. You know what? I think we're going to have a great year. I'm putting my cap on because...
By the way, we need to see your comments on our Facebook site. I want to know what people think about Joe's decor today. I mean, he's got every color of the rainbow on him today. I mean, he is extraordinarily colorful today. And we know him to be a very colorful man
this is
indeed.
going to be an extraordinarily colorful year. So you folks have a great new year and stay tuned for 2017. Great things are going to happen.